I was standing in my kitchen, sipping my coffee when I saw her again. Karen. Of course, it's always Karen. It's like she has nothing better to do than poke her nose into everyone's business. And today, she was standing at the edge of my backyard, staring at the thick fog rolling in, wrinkling her nose like she'd just smelled something rancid. You know, that fog is really unsettling, she called out, her voice carrying over to my window. It's unnatural. I can't believe you let this happen in your yard. Ah, Karen, always complaining about something. She had a point, though. The fog had come out of nowhere. One minute it was a clear afternoon, and the next, well, my backyard looked like the set of a horror movie. But that's just how things go around here. I tried to ignore her, knowing full well that no matter how much I told her to mind her own business, she'd never listen. Still, I thought I'd let her have her little rant. The fog wasn't my fault, after all. But as she stood there, practically shaking her finger at me, I noticed something odd. The fog wasn't just swirling in place as fog usually does. It was moving. It was as if it had a mind of its own. It seemed to be circling around the old oak tree in the center of my backyard, almost as if it were hiding something. My curiosity piqued. I decided to step outside, coffee in hand, and offer my usual half-hearted "Karen, go home" speech. You've been on my lawn for 10 minutes, Karen. I don't pay you rent, I called out as I approached. She turned to me with that same judgmental stare. You really should do something about this fog, she said, her eyes narrowing. It's dangerous. Dangerous? It's fog, Karen. It's not a haunted mist. I had to laugh at myself for even trying to reason with her. She wasn't the type to let logic get in the way of a good, old-fashioned drama. Then something happened that I still can't explain. As I stood there, looking at the swirling mist, I saw something emerge from the depths of it. At first, it looked like a shadow. But no, it wasn't just a shadow. It was something. Someone, and they were coming right toward us. I froze, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. I couldn't be seeing what I was seeing. Karen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady but failing miserably. Do you see that? She looked at me like I was crazy, but when she turned around, her face drained of color. What in the world is that? She whispered. I couldn't answer her. I didn't know what it was either, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't something you'd expect to see in your backyard on a Tuesday afternoon. The fog parted in front of us, revealing a figure cloaked in black. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its features were hidden in shadow. We stood there, staring at it for what felt like an eternity, neither of us willing to move. It took a moment for either of us to speak again, and when we did, it was a jumble of nervous, confused words. It's not fog, is it? Karen asked, a little too quiet for her usual loud self. No, it's not fog, I replied, and it's definitely not good. The figure didn't make a sound, but the air around it felt colder, the kind of cold that made you want to grab a blanket and hide under the covers. But I wasn't going to run, not in front of Karen. I had to be brave, for both of us. Karen, of course, was already taking steps back, eyes wide, ready to bolt if anything else moved. I think it's best if we... She didn't even get to finish her sentence before the figure moved. It didn't walk. It just glided like it was floating above the ground. Run! Karen shrieked, turning around and making a beeline for her front door. I stood there for a second, wondering if I should follow her, but something told me that running wasn't going to solve this. So I did what any normal, sane person would do when faced with the paranormal. I stood my ground and tried to make peace with whatever strange force had decided to grace my backyard. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? Karen wasn't about to save me. The figure drew closer, and I swear, for a second, it almost seemed to reach out to me. Then, with a sudden gust of wind, the fog disappeared, vanished, just like that. The figure was gone. All that was left was a still, silent yard. The oak tree stood in the same spot it always had, and the grass, well, the grass was still there. But Karen, she was gone, and for the next few days, I didn't hear a peep from her about my fog or anything else for that matter. It was like she'd been silenced, or more likely, she just couldn't come up with any more complaints when she had a near-death experience to process. Whatever it was, I didn't mind the quiet. For a while, I thought the whole thing was just some bizarre coincidence. But then, something started happening. Every morning, when I stepped outside for my coffee, the air was different. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was just right. And every day, as I stood there sipping my coffee, I'd hear the faintest sound of footsteps, quiet, distant, but unmistakable. And it wasn't just me. My neighbor, Carol, had started complaining about strange noises in her yard too. I swear, I heard something last night, walking around my garden, she told me one morning. Sounds like boots on gravel. I didn't know how to tell her. I wasn't hearing boots on gravel. I was hearing something much worse. But at least, for now, the fog was gone. And Karen, well, I hadn't seen her since that day. Whatever it was that visited our backyard seemed to have moved on as well. Or at least, that's what I thought until last week when I saw her again. And this time she wasn't complaining about my yard. She was too busy looking over her shoulder because, you see, Karen had learned the hard way that not everything in the world is just fog. Some things are much more sinister. And after that day, she'd never look at my backyard the same way again. The next morning, after that strange encounter with the fog and the figure, I couldn't help but notice how eerily quiet everything was. It was as if the entire neighborhood had collectively decided to hold its breath. I took my usual stroll to the mailbox, thinking maybe it was all just a bad dream. Maybe Karen had just gotten a little too dramatic, as she often did, and I had let my imagination get the best of me. But as I walked past her house, her immaculate, overly decorated house, mind you, I saw her again. Only this time, she wasn't standing out front, glaring at me like I'd stolen her parking spot. No, Karen was inside, and I could tell something was off. The curtains were drawn, the lights were dim, and to make it worse, there was a strange buzzing sound coming from her yard. I had to investigate. Naturally, I walked up to her front door, thinking maybe I should check on her, offer to make sure her life wasn't spiraling into paranormal chaos. Maybe she needed a friend who could tell her what it was like to be a normal human being with a normal human yard and a normal human fog. So I knocked 3 times. I didn't get the usual "what do you want" from behind the door. No, instead, I heard something. No, someone walking around inside, slowly, too slowly, the kind of pace that makes you think something is definitely wrong. I knocked again, this time harder. "Karen," I called out, "are you okay? I mean, after the incident." The door creaked open, but not in the usual way. It wasn't a smooth, polite creak. It was like something heavy was dragging across the floor, making the house moan in protest. Then she appeared. And I wish I could say it was the usual Karen I knew, the one who'd yell at you for leaving your trash can out too long or demand you repaint your house the color she liked. This was someone different. Her face was pale, drained of color, and her eyes were wide and unblinking. "I need you to help me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone like Karen, who is notoriously tough and vocal about everything, says they need help in a tone that sounds like a terrified child asking for a nightlight, you start to reconsider your life choices. "Help with what, exactly?" I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking I cared, but this was beginning to feel more like a thriller movie than my usual interactions with her. She looked over her shoulder nervously before stepping back and opening the door wide enough for me to see inside. The smell hit me first. Old, musty, like something had died in there. Then I saw the state of her home. It was a disaster. The living room, once pristine and full of her precious figurines and tasteful decor, now looked like a tornado had passed through. Books were scattered, vases were shattered, and her collection of tchotchkes, don't ask me why, but Karen loved her little knickknacks, were now strewn about as if they had been thrown in every direction. "It's happening again," she said, voice trembling. "I thought it was gone, but it's back, and it's worse than before." "What's back, Karen?" I asked, stepping inside carefully, because honestly, this was beginning to feel like I had walked into a haunted house tour. "The figure," she whispered, and just hearing her say it made my skin crawl. "It's been following me. The fog is back too, and it's not normal fog. It's... She trailed off, clearly too frightened to finish the sentence. I stood there, trying to absorb what she was saying. The figure? The fog? Had I somehow managed to open a door to some cursed dimension in my own backyard? Was this my fault? Did I anger something by standing around like an idiot in my own yard? "I don't know what to do," Karen said. finally breaking through my thoughts. I thought maybe if I removed the fog, if I could stop whatever's causing it, it would stop following me. But it's not leaving. You mean you're still seeing the thing? I asked just to clarify. Yes, she said. And last night it spoke to me, or at least I think it did. I heard whispers, faint at first, but now they're louder, and I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if I've actually opened some portal to hell. You're definitely losing your mind, I replied without hesitation. The words were out before I could stop myself, but I didn't feel guilty about it. Not one bit. I mean, I had a certain reputation to uphold, and besides, Karen was the one who had come running to me in a panic, and I wasn't about to give her a lecture about the importance of mental health. It's real, she insisted, not even flinching at my snarky remark. I can feel it in my bones, and I think it's trying to hurt me. Her voice cracked at the end, and I knew she wasn't just messing around anymore. She wasn't the type to show fear, not in the way she was now. Something was definitely wrong. What exactly did it say? I asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated for a moment, eyes darting to the corner of the room like she was expecting the figure to suddenly appear. I didn't catch all of it, she said, voice shaking, but it said something about a bargain, and then it laughed. Laughed? Well, I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe just a bad dream, I said, trying to downplay it. But if it makes you feel better, I'll keep an eye on your fog. All right. She nodded, though the fear in her eyes didn't subside. I didn't have the heart to tell her that the last thing I wanted to do was keep an eye on her fog, but I was already knee-deep in this mess, and I wasn't about to leave her hanging, even if I was, one sarcastic comment, away from an existential crisis. The fog hadn't left my backyard either, and if it had moved on to Karen's house, maybe, just maybe, it was something that followed us both. Something neither of us could escape. The next few days passed in a haze of unease. I went through the motions, working, eating, pretending everything was normal, but something was definitely off. The fog, for one, hadn't let up. It wasn't thick, like the mist we had that day in the yard, but it clung to the edges of my property like a persistent, unwanted guest. And every morning I'd step outside to find the same eerie stillness. No birds, no rustling leaves, nothing, just fog. But that wasn't even the weirdest part. The weirdest part was that the figure hadn't disappeared. No, it had become a part of my routine. Each time I looked out the window, it was there, lurking just beyond the boundary of the fog, just outside my view. It never came closer, but it never left either. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do about it, but I figured I'd wait. Maybe the figure would get bored and leave on its own. After all, Karen hadn't come to visit me again. She was dealing with her own mess, and I was content to let her deal with it. But then, one afternoon, as I was sitting in my favorite chair, sipping my coffee and half watching a rerun of a show I'd seen too many times, something changed. The figure was standing there, right in front of me. I couldn't see its face, if it even had one, but I could feel its presence, the weight of it pressing down on me. It was like a cold, invisible hand was resting on my chest, squeezing just enough to make breathing feel difficult. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. There's a weird, primal part of you that knows when to freeze, when to not make a sound, and this was one of those times. The figure didn't move either. It simply stood there, like it was waiting for something. I should have run. I should have screamed, called someone, done something, but I didn't. I wasn't sure what was worse, confronting it or pretending like it didn't exist. After a few minutes, I couldn't take the silence anymore. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. It was like I was talking to myself, but in a place that wasn't my own. There was no answer, of course, just the same eerie stillness. But this time, I felt something shift in the air, like the fog wasn't the only thing that was alive. I took a slow step forward, my heart hammering in my chest. As if on cue, the figure moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, but it shifted just enough to make me realize that it was aware of me. That's when I heard it. The whisper, a low, guttural sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't in any language I knew. It wasn't even close to being a word. It was a growl, a hum, a vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once, filling the air around me. It made the fog fog feel denser, like I was breathing it in. And then just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The fog remained, clinging to my backyard like a heavy blanket, but the figure was no longer there. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it real? Was I losing my mind? Or had the fog somehow warped my perception of reality? I didn't know, but I knew one thing: whatever it wasn't over. That night, after the sunset, I decided to confront it. I wasn't going to let this thing control me. If it wanted to haunt my backyard, it could at least give me a reason. So I grabbed my flashlight, threw on my shoes, and made my way outside. I could feel the fog before I even stepped out the door. It was there, waiting for me. The thick, damp air clung to my skin as I walked out into the yard, my breath coming in short, controlled bursts. The world felt too quiet, too still. The trees didn't rustle, the ground didn't shift beneath my feet. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I shone the flashlight around, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was hiding in the mist, but there was nothing, just the same heavy, oppressive fog. And then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. It wasn't much, just a shift in the fog, a brief glimpse of something dark, something alive. Without thinking, I moved toward it. "I know you're there," I called out, my voice louder than it had been earlier. "Come out. I'm not afraid of you." I don't know what possessed me to say that. I wasn't brave, I wasn't fearless, but something about this situation, it was like I had no other choice, like I had to face whatever this thing was, or it would keep haunting me forever. The figure didn't appear right away. Instead, the fog seemed to swirl, almost like it was reacting to my words. And then, just as I was starting to think I was losing my mind, it emerged, slowly. Stepping out from the mist, the figure took form once more. But this time, it wasn't just standing there. This time, it was moving toward Messi. I didn't know whether to run or stand my ground, but I wasn't about to let it catch me off guard. I held my ground, flashlight raised, prepared for whatever came next. As it drew closer, the whispers began again, only this time they were louder. I could almost make out good words, but they didn't make sense. They were too garbled, too distorted. It was like they were coming from 1,000 different places at once. The figure finally stopped, standing just a few feet away from me, and then it spoke. Its voice was nothing like a human's. It was cold and distant, like it was coming from a place that wasn't even part of this world. "Leave," it said, its voice a low rasp that sent a shiver down my spine. "Leave this place, or it will consume you." I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't about to give it the satisfaction of seeing me cower, but I had to admit the warning struck something deep within me. It wasn't a threat per se, it was a promise that whatever was out here, whatever was hiding in the fog, had control, and if I didn't listen, well, that was something I wasn't willing to find out. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned around and walked back inside. I didn't run, I didn't scream, I just walked away. But as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, not by a long shot. And the fog, it didn't disappear, not that night, not the next morning. It was still there, waiting. The days that followed felt like they were caught in some sort of twisted time loop. The fog, stubborn and unyielding, didn't seem to care about the passage of time. It clung to the edges of my yard like it had taken root, refusing to dissipate with the rise of the sun. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, as much as I tried to convince myself that it was just a natural phenomenon, the figure kept appearing, just beyond my sight, always lurking, always waiting. It was like something out of a bad horror movie, the kind where you know the characters are going to make the worst possible decisions and end up getting eaten by the monster. But this wasn't a movie, this was real life, and for once I was the one trapped in the middle of it all. I thought about calling the authorities. Maybe they could investigate, send someone to check out the strange fog, the creepy figure, but I quickly dismissed the idea. I could just imagine the look on the officer's face when I told them, "Oh hey, there's this creepy figure that's been hanging around my backyard, and I think it's trying to hurt me." They'd send me straight to the nearest therapist and never look back. So I decided to deal with it myself. After all, if Karen could handle whatever bizarre situation she was in, surely I could manage a little fog and a shadowy figure. But as the days wore on, it became clear that I wasn't just dealing with some overactive imagination. No, The situation was escalating. One afternoon, while I was in my kitchen, I heard something. A thud. A soft, muffled thud, like something had fallen outside. At first, I assumed it was just the wind. Maybe a branch had come loose or something. But when the thudding continued, slow and rhythmic, I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed my flashlight again and cautiously stepped outside. The fog was thicker than usual, the air damp and heavy, but the sound of the thud was unmistakable now. It was coming from my backyard. Without thinking, I moved toward the noise, each step feeling like I was walking deeper into something I couldn't control. As I reached the edge of the fog, I stopped. The thudding was now more distinct, and then I saw it. A shape, just barely visible through the mist, moving slowly but steadily. I held my breath, my heart racing. There was something about the way it moved that made my blood run cold. It was dragging itself along the ground, leaving behind an unmistakable trail of destruction. I stepped forward, raising the flashlight. "What the hell is that?" I muttered under my breath. The figure didn't stop. It didn't even acknowledge me. It just kept moving, dragging its form through the thick fog like it was a part of it. And then I saw it, a flash of something shiny, something metallic, glinting in the dim light. My stomach churned. It was a chain, a thick rusted chain that seemed to be wrapped around whatever this thing was. I took a step back, but I couldn't look away. What was it? A person? A creature? Some twisted manifestation of the fog itself? I didn't know, and that scared me more than anything else. As the figure got closer, I could make out more details. It wasn't human, not in any way that I could comprehend. Its shape was wrong, its movements jerky and unnatural, and the chain, it was attached to something deeper, something dark. I could feel it. It was like the air itself was thickening, pulling at my skin. I turned to leave, but the fog seemed to close in on me. The figure was too close now. I couldn't outrun it. And just as I was about to scream for help, though let's be honest, I had no idea who would be foolish enough to help me in a situation like this, it stopped. The figure stood motionless, its form barely visible through the fog, the chain dragging behind it like it was waiting for something. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. Was this it? Was this the end of the line for me? Was I about to be consumed by whatever this thing was? "What do you want?" I finally asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay composed. The figure didn't answer. Of course, it didn't. But just as I was about to turn and run, because seriously, who wouldn't run away from something that looked like it belonged in a nightmare? A voice echoed from the fog. It wasn't the figure. It wasn't even a whisper. It was clear, sharp, and unmistakable. "It's too late," the voice said. And I froze. It was a woman's voice, not Karen's, but a voice I didn't recognize. "You made the mistake of looking. You crossed the line, and now you belong to it." I didn't have the faintest clue what that meant, but something deep inside me, the part of me that wanted to rationalize everything, to tell myself this was just a bad dream, told me that whatever was in that fog was more than just an illusion. It was real, and it wasn't going to let me go. But just as suddenly as the voice had appeared, it was gone. The fog lifted slightly, and the figure, whatever it was, dissolved back into the mist, vanishing like it had never been there. I stood frozen for a long moment, unsure of what I had just experienced. Had it been real? Had I just lost my mind? And most importantly, what did it mean for me? That night, I lay awake in bed, my thoughts swirling. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the mind, some bizarre series of events that had all lined up to make me feel like I was losing control. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't finished with me, and it wasn't going to stop until it had what it wanted. I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. The fog, the figure, the voice, it was all real, and I had a feeling that Karen wasn't the only one who was going to have to face it.